Hello, today I'll be explaining you how to create a loading screen for your game. So for that you need to create a new script. New script would have this two by default. These two lines they will have by default. You will need to add this one though, which is using Unity Engine Scene Management. This line will let you switch between two scenes. And in between those two scenes, when they are switching, we would add a loading screen. So how to do that? So after you have written this, beneath your mono behavior, create a boolean and name it anything. I have named it loading. You can name it private or public, it doesn't matter, but there is no reason to keep anything public unless you are certain that you are going to need it in another script. So we are not going to need this boolean anywhere else. So we are going to set it private. Boolean loading screen and set it to false. Why are we creating this boolean is because sometimes what happens in Unity is whenever you are loading a screen, the screen loads twice. To avoid that, basically we do this. Without this boolean, the script still would work, but you will sometimes run into an error, or sometimes the scene management won't work the way you want to. So to be safe, it's better to create this. Then create a public game object loading screen. It could be a game object, it could be a UI element. I mean, UI element are also game objects. So whichever you want, just a loading screen for your game. So this will contain the loading screen of your game, whichever you want the player to see when the loading screen appears. That will be contained by this. Now the real script starts. First create a void loading. So what this void loading does is basically execute this script. So it could be loading or anything else you want, it doesn't matter, but it has to be public because we will be using this function in a button. So let me show you. I have a button here, and this button is using the loading here. As you can see, it uses the load, sorry, it uses the load. So it this won't appear here if it is not public. So you have to set it as public, and then in that you have to also write the string and scene name. You can have this rather than string, you can have it as integer. Let me show you what that does. As you can see, both of my scenes have a name and a number. So if you want to use these numbers, you can use int standing for integer, or you can just use the name. I have chosen to be a name, and for that name you need to write string. So after this, in the load, you need to create if loading is true, then return. If you just write is loading, is fine. You don't have to say equal to true, it will just take it that way. So when we basically execute the script, first it sets the loading to true, then this checks if it is true or not, then we start a coroutine, and this is the coroutine that we start. What this coroutine does, let us see. But first, let's see what you have to write here. Start coroutine, inside brackets, name this whatever you want to. I have named it load scene async, and beneath, and not beneath, and inside it, in two brackets, the name that you set here. If you have set it to int, whichever name you want, but in general what people do is int and then index. I have string, so I have scene name. But if you have set it as int, most likely you're going to name it as index. So here also you need to name it as index. Then create a private enumerator and name whichever name you set here. Then string or int that you have. If int, then here your index, or a scene name or any other name you have here. Then you need to create an async operation. You don't need to know everything about this. You can, if you want to, you can read the Unity documentation for this. but you don't need to know everything about it. Then name it as async loader. It doesn't have to be async loader. I named this as async loader. You can name it as anything you want. And then equal to scene manager dot load scene async, which is the name of this. So the same thing you will write here. And then scene name or index or anything you named it as. Then create a while loop, and in that while loop type yield return null. Now this is something that you need to understand is whichever name you named your async operation, you have to write it here and then write a dot, I mean a full stop or dot, whichever, a dot, and then it's done. So basically what it does is while your loading is done, execute this script. But now you would be saying there is a not here. Exactly. It is because you want to show your loading screen before your other scene is done loading. So that is why there is a not. So while your loading is not done, execute the script. So what the script does is it's a basic script. If loading is true, which is which is will happen whenever we basically execute the script, whenever the scene is loading, this will be true. Then what you need to do is loading screen set active true. Again, you don't have to do this. You can just write loading screen dot set active true without this if function here, and it will still work, and it will still work properly, I guess. But to be sure, just to be sure, I have just written it here. You can totally ignore this one. I'm pretty sure it will work fine. But if you don't want to take any risk, if you're making a big game or something, you can do this as well. So let me show you how to set it up. So to set it up, first apply it to an object. I have applied it to scene change, which is an empty object. I have taken this script and applied it here. This is your loading screen for the uh, game object that we created. So just drag and drop the loading screen here, and then you go to the manager. I have named it as manager. Most likely it will be the button that you have, a button named start game or option, whichever button you need that game, and that button would have this one button down. You add one here by pressing this plus button. You drag and drop the scene change, because this scene change has this scripting in here, scene loader. Then you go to no functions, use scene loader function and load. As you can see, there is something here that says string. If you have an int here, it will say int, and then rather than writing the whole name, you will just write the number. So for example, sample, I have written sample scene. If you have int here, you will have to write 1 as the scene. Sample scene is 1. That's it. So now this is it. So when I press F1, basically the script executes. If you are using a button, when you press the button with your mouse, this will happen, but rather than me pressing mouse button, I will press F1. So let's see how it works. So whenever I press F1, as you can see, the loading happened. In the second scene, I also have the same setup. So there's nothing, just ignore this one. So the same loading screen here in a canvas. Game object is an empty game object. It has that F1 thing and also the loading scene script in the same thing. So I drag and drop this whole loading screen here and scene loader loading, and name the heritage restoration. The name, if you have 90, you would name it as 0, as we saw here. So you name 0. So let's press F1 again. As you saw. So this is how it works.